Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Buenos dias, damas y caballeros. My name is Dr. Abraham Benavides. I'm 29 years old and I'm the youngest speaker at this conference. I'm here to talk to you today about my personal story and also about the research that I conducted while I was in medical school. I'll also tell you about the way I got into the cannabis industry, as well as some of the consulting work that I do today, which is also advocacy work. It's a huge honor to be here because my family story started here in Costa Rica. Um, in the photo here is my family. You can see I'm there at 6 years old, and those are my older brothers. My older brothers and my dad were born here in San Jose, and my mom was born in Alajuela. They all grew up in abject poverty. My mom was very food insecure, often did not have enough food to eat, and my dad went to school without shoes. And so they, through ministry, went to immigrate to Mexico and then to the United States, where my dad pursued higher education, and I got a chance to also pursue higher education. So I'm an American doctor, but I'm actually now living here in Costa Rica today. My wife and I decided to move here 2 months ago, both for my health purposes and also to help caretake for my dad. This is my dad on the left. There he is graduating from Boston University in the year 2000. And there I am graduating from Boston University in the year 2014. When I was a kid, my dad started showing signs of a very rare degenerative muscular disorder called inclusion body myositis, or IBM for short. So since I was younger, I started caretaking for him until at this point he is completely dependent on us for care. IBM is a complete whole body weakness. So my dad did ministry as long as he could in the United States. And you can see the photo on the right is him presiding over our marriage ceremony. And that was the last service that he has conducted in the US, which was very meaningful. But it also, in addition to being a childhood hardship and a hardship for our family, it was also the impetus for me studying medicine. This inspired me to pursue a career in medicine, and fortunately, after undergrad, I was offered the opportunity of a lifetime to study medicine tuition free at the George Washington University. So I was awarded a 4-year full tuition award to study at GW. And in my first 2 years of medical school, I noticed that we weren't learning absolutely anything about cannabis. We heard maybe it causes psychosis, and maybe there's a dependency possibility as well. And I thought to myself, well, this really can't be the whole story, can it? Because cannabis had just been legalized in the district the year that I started medical school. And I knew from my great grandmother's experience that there's a lot to herbalistic medicine and naturopathic medicine. My great grandmother actually was one of the founders of the town that I live in now, which is in Cartagena, Guanacaste. And she was a partera. She was a natural healer who used tropical medicine, and she would ride around on horseback and deliver natural and alternative medicines to people in nearby towns. And she would also help women in labor as a midwife. And she was using techniques such as psychedelic medicine. She knew about antiseptic use. And I don't know that she ever used cannabis, but she likely used hemp, as that was grown here for a while before the days of Prohibition. And her memory is what inspired me to look into more about cannabis. And So I actually started the very first medical student interest group on purely the topic of medical cannabis education, the first of its kind at any medical school in the United States. And I called this group the Cannabis as Medicine Interest Group. I was actually inspired by meeting Dr. Malik Burnett, who was the co-chair of Initiative 71 in Washington, D.C. And he gave me an idea that I could start a student organization about it. And when I didn't find any pre-existing uh, constitution or outline for such a group, I created my own. And I needed to seek a mentor. And I actually found Dr. Kogan, who is one of the other presenters at the conference here today. And he helped me, he helped advise my group. He helped me get the faculty signature that I needed. And I also got the green light from the dean's office. And so I found other leadership. In the top right photo, there we are presenting our research that we conducted as a group. That's Paneet Gupta, one of the other co-authors of the paper and the poster, and was also one of the leaders of the group. And so while we were in medical school, we conducted a research survey, which was published into this paper called Medical Students Are Unprepared to Counsel Patients About Medical Cannabis and Want to Learn More. And you can see Mikhail Kogan is also on this paper, and he is still a dear friend and mentor to me to this day. So I developed a very simple 5-question survey that was distributed to all the medical students. And we started with this public health problem statement, which basically says that as becomes more accessible in the US world, med schools and their regulatory bodies need to be urged to adopt standards for cannabis education in order to make us better future physicians. We need to have better understanding of the endocannabinoid system and the risk benefits of cannabis use. And so the survey that we conducted at my medical school clearly demonstrates that there is a dire need and want to increase medical education on this. We distributed the survey to 845 students and got 105 of them to respond, which is about almost a 13% response rate. And as you can see here, the distribution of the responses were pretty even. The first question asked students, how much formal education have you received on cannabis in medical school? A whopping majority, 60% of students said they had not received any education on medical cannabis at all in medical school. And another large proportion of students also said that they only received a little bit. Only 2 students out of the 105 surveyed said that they had received a sufficient amount of cannabis training in medical school. The next question asks them whether they think that there should be more formal education on medical cannabis in school classes. And an overwhelming majority, almost 80% of students, either agreed or strongly agreed that this is a topic we need to be learning about while in medical school. Then we asked them if they had encountered a patient in the clinic who had a question or was curious about medical cannabis. Again, a majority of students said yes. 55% of students had found a patient in clinic who had asked them the question about cannabis. But when we asked them if they felt prepared to counsel a patient on the benefits of cannabis use, again, a majority of students said that they did not feel at all prepared, and 40% only felt slightly prepared. There was only 4 students who felt prepared at all, who felt either prepared or very prepared to counsel a patient on this use. Very similar results also we got for whether the student would be able to counsel a patient on the health hazards of cannabis use. Again, the majority of students said they were not at all prepared. So in summary, when you look at all of these results together, what we see is a huge gap in the education that medical students have and how prepared they are to answer questions. And between that and whether they would be able to counsel patients on cannabis related questions. So even though a majority of them had met a patient who was curious about cannabis, vast majority of them were completely unprepared to give them any information or had received any training at all on cannabis education. So this demonstrates that there's a huge need to increase education on this topic. Subsequent studies have been published similar to mine um, in other medical schools and in other professions like nursing. And they've all pretty much echoed the same sentiment that healthcare professionals don't really know anything about this topic at all. And they desperately need professional level training on this topic because it is a real issue that they are seeing in clinic. Okay, so back to another personal anecdote, and one that I think that many people out there can really relate to because discrimination in America is very real. So there I was, very recently graduated from medical school. I had just gotten married to the love of my life, Megan, and I had matched into a residency program to begin my training in family medicine. And we were all set to go. We had spent all our money in trying to move there. We'd spent all our savings getting to Colorado, driving across the country. And before driving across the country, I submitted for a routine pre-employment urine drug screen, which resulted in a positive test for THC initially. And when I got to Colorado, they asked me about it, and I was fully honest. I said that yes, I had consumed. I was living in a legal area in Washington, D.C., moving to a legal area in Colorado, and that I hadn't consumed since then, since we were celebrating the end of medical school, the greatest achievement of our lives, and that I would be happy to play by the rules if this was something that they didn't want on my record. And so I simply asked for a retest, and they said, "Oh, well, we'll think about it." And I went through orientation, and the other residents told me, "Absolutely, don't worry about it. This is something that happens all the time. Many of us test positive for cannabis, and we're retested all the time, and it shouldn't be a problem." I even went through orientation with food poisoning, dutifully showed up at work. But then after orientation, I suddenly got a call from HR saying, "You're not cleared to start work. Don't come in on Monday." And I was shocked. I was shocked because I had gotten reassurance from the other residents who were, all of them were white, and all of them had been offered retests. And when I asked for one, HR denied me that opportunity. And so I decided to set out and correct this. So I ordered myself a retest. I went again to LabCorp, submitted a sample, and the test was negative. And I showed them this, and I said, I have the same results as many other people in the program, a positive and a negative, and I'm very happy to comply. You can test me all 3 years of family medicine residency if you'd like. But they were stubborn about it, and they said no. And they insisted that I would be denied employment at this residency program in Colorado, even though I was telling them, I know you retest my other white colleagues all the time. What is the difference between me and them? Is this maybe because I'm Hispanic? And as soon as I mentioned that, they totally clammed up and they shut down all communications with me. And so I thought to myself, well, what can I do? And I decided to call the Colorado Physician Health Program, CPHP, which is the authority for clearing doctors to be sure they're safe to practice. And I turned myself in. I called them. I said, I really need to meet with somebody. I think that they're being unfair to me because I have clearly proven a negative retest, but they don't want to accept it. They said that accepting it was, quote, outside of their policy. Even though their policy was entirely vague, they decided to put the lives of my wife and I completely outside of their hands and decide to abandon us there in the desert of southern Colorado without any income. We had just signed a lease, and we were both suddenly, and I was suddenly unemployed. So CPHP was very concerned about what they'd heard, not because of my end, but because of the way that Centura Health had treated me. And they told me that this is clear racism because they had never met a resident in my position before, ever. I was the first one to show up and tell them a story just like this. And they felt very bad for me. But I went through a full day of biopsychosocial interview, and I was cleared right away without any concerns. And so they wrote a letter on my behalf asking Centura to please reconsider. And they also paired me up with one of their attorneys. So I met with their attorney, who told us we did have a very clear employment discrimination case. However, it would take at least 3 years to get them into court. And this was very much something that we could not afford. So the sad part is we weren't able to afford justice at that point. And so the attorney said the best thing I could do would be to voluntarily submit for 3 months of random drug screening at my own expense, which I happily did, just to prove to the next program that I was good to go and that there's no concern about any problematic use, which I shouldn't have even have to prove because I had already disproven that in the first place. But this was another burden placed on our family and another huge expense. And I thought to myself, well, what am I going to do? I'm out here. We need work. So Megan found a job as a teacher nearby. And I put my cannabis expertise and writing expertise up for sale online as a editing freelancer. And that is how I got my start in the industry. I documented this whole story and published it on Verihill's platform in an article called "Cannabis Testing Keeps Qualified Talent Out of the Game," and I'd invite you to look it up and read it and get a sense for how cannabis testing policies are ostensibly legal, but are very often used as a veil for intense racial discrimination. But luckily, I was able to find work starting with some Canadian CBD websites. CBD thing was starting with Daily CBD in Canada and Bloom and Oil as well. And then I found some more websites that were in need of a medical reviewer. And so I kept building my freelancing profile from there until I eventually landed bigger and bigger clients. And I would say that my biggest client is Veriheal right now. Veriheal, for those who don't know, is the largest e-prescriber of medical cannabis cards in the United States. They see over 2 million patients annually, and they have selected me as their lead medical reviewer and main researcher. So if you Google just about any condition plus cannabis, you will likely find Veriheal at the top of the Google search results. And I am the medical reviewer now behind every single one of those posts. And I do literature review and fact checking to be sure that the content that they're putting out there for each of these conditions is up to date and is accurate and is not spreading any misinformation. And I'm also now working for Cannabis Research Group, which is a new but also very interesting database for all articles cannabis that are neatly organized by cannabinoid, even by terpene and condition. And it gives subscribers a very nice summary of the latest state of research out there. So this is something that I continue to work on and update myself on. I'm always reading literature. I'm always reading something new. And I'm also now writing certain ebooks for VeriHeal. I just authored a 40-page ultimate guide to medical cannabis for VeriHeal. And I'm now writing a second ebook called Understanding Cannabinoids and Terpenes. Okay, so after that year in Colorado, I had to try to apply again to the match. And I matched again into a residency program in Seattle, and I started working there. However, 6 months into the job, we were in the pandemic, and I was taking care of a COVID patient in the IMCU, and I contracted COVID from them. 2 days later, I felt like a train had hit me. I was completely short of breath. I had many, many, many symptoms, and I was out of work for 5 or 6 weeks. I tried to return, but because I knew we were short staffed, but I still wasn't feeling 100%. And so after I tried to return, I wound up in the hospital myself, admitted to our own IMCU. And I'm still recovering from these long-term sequelae. I got sick on December 9th of 2020, or 2021. No, I'm sorry, of 2020. And I have been sick ever since. So that's when we decided to move down here to Costa Rica so that I can continue my healing, because I'm not sure how long this will take. But I'm very grateful to be here alive today, sharing the story with you. So here we are. This is my house and my parents' house, technically, in Costa Rica, in Cartagena of Guanacaste. That's my dad and my dog. Our dog's name is Bruschetta. She is a very sweet, loving pug. And my wife and I help take care of my parents here in Cartagena, which is the very small town that my great-grandmother helped found many, many years ago. So what are my recommendations for Costa Rica? This is a list of proposed actions that I think would greatly benefit Costa Rica. First off, we need to introduce medical school curriculum on the endocannabinoid system and cannabis use into the University of Costa Rica, and have new doctors be learning about this and be ready for the questions they'll encounter in the field. We also need to create a set of public health courses, preferably online, preferably self-guided, for healthcare professionals, so that they can learn all about this at their own pace, since they're out of healthcare professional school. Costa Rica should legalize, tax, and regulate sales of recreational and medical cannabis, because there are really huge economic benefits, and benefits as well as employment, tourism, better medical care, reduced burden on the legal system, and an improvement in overall social justice. And finally, we need to eliminate pre-employment urine drug screening for cannabis. There are many systematic reviews that demonstrate that cannabis users are not at an increased risk of occupational injury, even in high-risk professions. And that this sort of testing and unnecessary discrimination causes shortages in the labor force and in essential employments, much like my own. The United States has now just lost a bilingual doctor, but hopefully one day I'll recover and be able to practice here in Costa Rica. Here is my contact page. I invite you to reach out to me if you have any consulting needs, or if you just want to share a personal story with me. I'm available anytime. This is my Costa Rican number, as well as my number in the United States. You can WhatsApp me. You should also give me a follow on Twitter. I'll follow back. And please check out my Doctor's Corner blog, now my own personal scientific and op-ed column on VeraHeal's website, as well as a link to the GoFundMe page if you are so kind. Thank you all so much for your attention today. It has been a great honor and a great deal of work coming from Costa Rica and now coming back here again. I hope to be able to serve this country in many ways, particularly using my skills and talents as a cannabis medical reviewer and expert. Thank you so much for your time.